Cool. Welcome back. This is the Build Lab stream for Mesa. Mesa has been in the waiting for a long time because we took a break from these recently, but now we're back. And I've changed my approach to these a little bit, so I'm really looking forward to that change in approach for frames like Mesa. Also Mirage, who is after this, I believe. Let's check if that's true. For Mag and Loki, I guess Loki it applies, but Mag I don't think there's too many challenges. Mag is a weird frame with some clear strengths to me, I guess. I didn't really have any confusion about how I would cover Mag. I actually think that made it a less interesting one. It's really more frames like Mesa and Mirage, well, to me anyway, that it's more useful to even do these. The reason is that I consider Mesa a pretty straightforwardly really good Warframe, and Mirage a pretty straightforwardly specific or kind of frustrating frame. Maybe Loki's a better example because most people don't agree with me that Mirage is wonky. These are frames where I feel like giving people ideas or inspiration is the most helpful. Like people actually want that. I feel like Mag, there's a million things people are doing. I don't know, maybe this is wrong. I'm just saying my perception is that doing this in the name of giving people refreshing, inspiring ideas, it feels like these are the frames that's actually useful, I guess. So anyway, I've been looking forward to the Mesa one for a variety of reasons. That is one of them. I don't think there's too much else to say about that. I'm gonna try to stick to more of a structure in this one. It's not going to be that noticeable. I just have a few segments that I often want to include, but I just forget, like it slips my mind. And I'm just going to make sure I do this time. There's the Twitch archive Parley form. You can use that to submit an archive Parley question for the break in the middle of the stream. I'm also going to send out the Discord notification. Quick note as well for people watching live, I am going to stream again today. After this stream today, I'm going to take about a 2-hour break, about 2 hours, and then I'm going to stream again for about 2 hours. If you watch Primetime, we're getting a raid from them. Digital Extremes folks offered to send them here afterward, and I said, sure, I'll stream another session. We will just be playing or working on like build projects of mine during that time. We're not going to do another frame or just play totally loose. I'm going to do something a little bit more specific, I guess, because I think that that's a better way to include people in something, the kind of thing we normally talk about here. If it's too focused, we have too much of an agenda, and there's thousands of people chiming in with whatever is on their mind, I can't address that, and I would like to welcome them in. They often have interesting new perspectives, and it's sustainable for getting new people to check out the channel. And if we do something too broad, a lot of the way we discuss things might be a little bit lost. A lot of people don't have the same premises going in that we do. Somebody might say, oh, I really want to have fun with this Warframe, so I'm doing this. And somebody who's never watched our stream before will say, but that frame is just bad. Which, if you've been here for a while, you understand that's just not really a useful or relevant perspective. A lot of people watching this stream are of the opinion that it just doesn't matter. But to that person, maybe they're at a point in their time playing Warframe or whatever game where it does matter. So there isn't really any useful discussion to be had there unless we get on the same page. I thus think it's most effective to stream something that gets people on the same page rather than something that requires already being on that same page, which is what we usually do. I don't like to do these often. I often say no to offers to collaborate like this, but I said yes to this one because I think it's worthwhile once in a while. I feel like the Warframe audience has been pretty good overall, so I don't really have any problems with welcoming those people in. But we don't do it very often because it is a bit different than the normal fare. But I hope that you'll enjoy yourself if you normally enjoy this stream with that little note about like how it differs from what we usually do. Cool. Let me just welcome people in, and then as usual, you got timestamps. People know about how these work already. These do fairly well. Like these get a good amount of views. Folks on YouTube, I'm glad you're enjoying these. Do you watch this part? Do you like these parts? I mean, I put a timestamp in so you can skip them if you want, but Anyway, Ace, welcome back. You said only sort of here, wanted to tune in for the personal sentimental value. I swore off Mesa for the longest time and came around when more toys were released via Helminth and Archon shards. Yes, you have a pretty interesting archive parlay question for today about heat stacking on Mesa, which I think we should do in the second half of the stream because that's a really cool idea. Mesa does seem, if I understand correctly, like a really uniquely good Warframe to do that on. That's cool. So yeah, I'm happy you chimed in on that. Ace, you said, I personally enjoy a nice health armor package on Mesa with Molt Reconstruct. Okay, wait, hold on. I want that, but I'm going to stop you right there. We'll come back to it once we do the intro stuff. But hold that thought, because that's what I want to hear. Molt Reconstruct, interesting. The regeneration, like the health regen augment for Saren's Molt, that's what that is, right? Anyway. Anyhow. Pistol Whip, welcome back. Red Drone, welcome back. What's going on? How you doing, Red Drone? That emote is really hypnotizing. And Pistol, welcome back. You said you prepared the wrong frame this week. I was wondering about the question about Mag. You did ask me if I had Mag's Magnetize Augment, and I thought, we did Mag. Maybe he's got some kind of weird, or maybe folks are trying to do some kind of weird augment thing. Anyway, Pistol. Pistol has been a time raider of the stream, and they often drop in to suggest something ahead of time. Pistol has had their pulse on the pattern of the frames pretty closely and watches most of these. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised to hear them say, I had something ready this week, but I'm sorry if I caused you confusion. We are doing Mesa. Pistol, how you doing? I know you weren't feeling great because you Pistol skipped some of their streams. They stream too over the past few weeks. You doing okay? How you feeling? Don't mean to pry, just making sure everything's okay. Audio Forces, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 30 months. Audio Forces, it's been a minute. Welcome back. How you doing? You came in time for Mesa stuff. We're going to do what we usually do, talk about abilities and augments. Then I want to do a brief little bit on direction. I'll talk about what I mean by that when we get there. Then do a chunk of builds, take a break, more builds, fashion, conclusion. I don't know why that deserved 2 thumbs up, but that's just the energy I have today because I'm streaming for 4 hours. 2 hours and then 2 hours, which is the much better way of streaming for 4 hours. She's a coming round the mountain when she comes. Mesa. Audio Forces, thank you for the tier 1 sub. I really appreciate it. Thanks for supporting the show. How you doing? Again, it's been a minute. Hope you're doing all right. Pixel, welcome back. I am very excited about what Ace said too. That's cool. Let's get into it so we can get to that. Again, because it is connected to Asymptomatic's parlay question for the archive, I think it's particularly good to do that during the second half, but yeah, we'll see what happens. If people don't have other ideas for the first half, I'm down. Pixel, you said it's worth noting that currently and until the next cert update, the game is bugged such that Mesa is significantly worse. We are not able to aim glide while casting things right now, with obvious peacemaker effects. I don't disagree that that is significant, but I don't think that it warrants not covering Mesa. Definitely if there's anything we discuss where you think, well, that would be made significantly better by aim gliding while, etc. Please feel free to bring it up, but I don't think that that means we should not discuss Mesa now. I feel like that is not a minor thing, but there's just enough going on to discuss that I don't think that kinesthetic elements of playstyle like movement are as important to focus on, mostly because I don't think they're necessary, and I think a lot of players simply can't sort of perform them. That doesn't mean they're not really interesting. I love it when you all bring them up. It's just the kind of thing that is very hard to replicate between players. Like for some players, they will say, I literally just can't do that, so that means nothing to me. Which again doesn't mean we shouldn't bring it up, just to say I don't think it is so important that we shouldn't cover. You said for sure, I just wanted to mention it because you're going to come up against it this stream and it warranted a warning. Yeah, fair enough. There are lots of like weird Mesa Peacemaker movement things that I'm personally pretty into. I've had different ways I've approached using Peacemaker over the years, so I'm actually pretty excited to talk about that. But I'm sure a lot of people will say they're Mesa's Waltz hungry, which is not that's no bad thing. I have been known to not use Mesa's Waltz from time to time, so okay. Anyway, let's begin our journey, shall we? Guided meditation or deep dive on build systems? You choose. Choose your path. Does this have a helmet ability? Nope. Excellent. Love that. Mesa stuff. It begins. Pistol, glad to hear you're doing better.
It's been a while, but this isn't my first build rodeo.
This isn't my first build rodeo. Glorious. Feather, welcome back. Thanks for the Prime sub for 20 months. You're just in time. It has been a minute. Welcome back. Good to see you. Thanks for supporting the show. We're going to talk through Mesa's abilities, then do augments, and go from there. Mesa's passive. What a passive. I love that they added the specifics to this because it's a passive where you really want to know the specifics. It says, shoot dual-wielded sidearms 15% faster and reload single-handed sidearms 25% more rapidly. Gain 50 bonus health when not using melee weapons. Now, imagine if it said, shoot dual-wielded sidearms faster and reload single-handed sidearms more rapidly. Gain bonus health when not using melee weapons. Without knowing how much of those things, you might think, well, wow, I'm gonna not use a melee weapon and, I don't know, use dual-wielded sidearms. Because of the magnitude of the effects, I would strongly recommend that you do the opposite of that. If you use your melee weapon, I would not unequip it to get 50 health. That isn't enough. And personally, I think that both bonuses for sidearms are negligible, but the reload speed is likely better. I don't know. I mean, they're both very small, and you have to be using a weapon where it's relevant, of course. I'm not sure that any of these bonuses warrant any action from the player, personally. Unfortunately, I think these are just too weak to be effects that are impactful. That being said, another way to look at it is, well, if you were ever going to not use a melee weapon on a frame, this frame gives you something for not doing that, so sure, you well could, I'm not going to address this too much more throughout the stream, but if somebody has a reason why they think this really provides some synergy, I'm into it. That being said, I just don't know if I think it matters that much. I frequently don't end up using my melee weapon when playing Mesa, but there are definitely a lot of things you could gain from using it. So I don't know. I don't have a lot of good things to say about this. Ballistic Battery. You activate this ability. It stores damage caused by guns, and then you trigger it again and you get big bonus damage on the next shot. Now, I forget exactly how this ability applies its effects. If you wanted to go big bongo damage hunting with an ability like this, what you'd want to know is, do you want multi-shot or not? Do you want status effects or crit or not? How does it play with those things? So for this one, I'm going to read the wiki page on this ability. And again, some folks in chat, you may already know the answer to your question about this. My point with this section is more to give the audience an example of how I would think through that process. You see this ability and think, you could massively increase the damage of one shot. What does one shot mean? I'll go to the wiki and read the details, and then maybe I can apply that in some way. It's a good fit that I think that way, but don't feel like I confidently know how to use this ability to do the most damage, so this is a great example. The wiki says, Mesa converts blah 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 70% of the total damage inflicted by her primary and secondary weapons into stored bonus damage to be used for the next shot when activated again. A max of whatever damage is stored per instance of damage, and a max of 5,000 damage is stored at full capacity. Is that affected by strength? Yes, it is. So imagine you had 200% strength, like I apparently do on this build. You can see the damage goes up to 10,000 or so. And it looks like how much you get per hit. Not clear. But anyway, Because it's most of your gun damage, it should build up pretty quick as long as you fire rapidly, because there's a max damage stored per instance. If you use multi-shot and fire quickly, it should build up very fast. That's been my experience. Charged shots from gun blades will also contribute to ballistic batteries damage. Thank you, Wiki. Sure. The wiki goes on to say that instances of damage that contribute to the charge counter include multi-shot, crit damage, damage over time, status effect damage, and syndicate radial effects. Now, damage over time is a big one because it caps, right? You can only get so much damage into the buffer per instance. And status effects will often tick for rather small bits of damage, many, many times, especially on lots of targets. You could potentially charge it very fast using status effects if I'm understanding correctly. So that's noteworthy. Once deactivated, the stored damage is added to your equipped weapon's damage. The stored damage will have the same damage composition as the equipped weapon and is not affected by base damage mods. Elemental damage mods, factor damage mods, crit damage, headshots, and status effect damage will factor in the increased damage. So basically, this is adding to the weapon's total base damage after mods. Between Hornet Strike or whatever and the rest of your mods, this adds this number. So let's say a weapon does 100 base damage. Hornet Strike will make it do 220% more base damage. It will then do, 320 base damage per shot. Then this will add 10,500 to that number, and then it will go into the calculation. So you can see that it should do a pretty absurd amount of damage. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, stored damage is not split across multiple projectiles. In the case of multi-shot weapons, only a single projectile can acquire stored damage. This means that if you have multi-shot, one of them is going to do hilariously more damage than the others, unless the weapon already has very high damage per shot. Interesting. So if a weapon has very good supplemental stats, especially crit, it seems like this ability will be more powerful. If a weapon has an explosive radius, this seems like it would be more powerful, because that allows it to deliver this bonus damage to a larger number of enemies with stats that supplement the base damage. You may be able to get a lot of mileage out of this by using it in a case where the weapon has very low base damage, but would be doing really good damage if only it had better base damage. You can imagine a theoretical weapon that has very low base damage relative to its extremely high, crit and status chance, and you would expect this ability to be very good on that theoretical weapon, which might otherwise have been kind of balanced or really weak. Does that make sense? So again, the purpose of this was not so much that you remember every detail or that people don't know how this works. Probably most people other than me do know how this works. The point of it was to walk through, if you're interested in this ability, that is what I would do to, think through that information. I think the paradox of this ability is that it implies that you brought a weapon that doesn't do the focused target damage you want, but you do want focused target, you want to kill one enemy super a lot with one big shot, but you didn't bring a weapon that does that or that's good at that. You want to make a weapon you have that isn't good at that, but you want a weapon to be good at that. Why didn't you just bring a weapon that is good at that? I don't know, that part's not entirely clear to me, but explosive weapons, yeah, okay, sure. Maybe Zeneric is setting the cost to 0 so for clarity, let's remove that. It don't cost a lot of energy. There we are. That's weird. Maybe, Ace. Thanks for saying that. Anyway, it's 25 energy. It don't cost a lot of energy. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how people recommend using this, if at all. I guess explosive weapons. Shooting gallery. We can go a lot faster now. I think a lot of Mesa's other abilities are pretty straightforward. Gives an ally extra damage while jamming the guns of nearby enemies. This power shifts between teammates. Very unclear description for this particular one. You get an instance of the effect, and your squad mates, if any, share a round-robin instance of the effect as well. In 2-player co-op, both of you have the effect for the whole duration. In 4-player co-op, you have the effect for the whole duration, and your 3 squad mates will have it switch between them for the duration. How often does it swap? I don't know. Question for the wiki. It's 2 instances of the buff will spawn. Duration per player is calculated by the following expression. Duration equals total duration divided by total number of players minus 1. There you go. Everyone gets it for an equal amount of time. Yeah. Now, it says extra damage, which implies that it is a separate damage multiplier. That means that in a lot of places in Warframe. Now, the last time I checked, it is not a separate damage multiplier. Let's see if the wiki agrees with that. Shooting Gallery applies an increase to your weapon's damage and stacks additively with other damage mods, meaning it isn't a separate damage multiplier. It seems like the wiki continues to agree. If that is still true, and it might be changed without warning at any time, so Warframe, you know, it's a negligible damage increase. It's 25 to 50% with you know, I have 200% strength on this build. That means that your serration or whatever is getting, you know, 10% maybe added to it. The marginal damage increase of this is extremely low if your weapon is modded already. It's just damage, but I mean, it's not that much damage. The crowd control can be fairly effective in my experience, and it's got a pretty good duration. The radius is pretty alright too at base. So yeah, I think this is a reasonable ability. It lasts a good amount of time. It jams enemies' guns. Yeah, like not bad, but definitely not like it sounds like a powerful damage increase ability, and I don't think it is most of the time. Very similar to how Pistol Amp isn't a powerful damage increase because it calculates the same way. It's not total damage is multiplied by this percent. You're just adding that much to your, you know, Hornet Strike or whatever. Shatter Shield. Envelops Mesa in a barrier of energy redirecting, reflecting back incoming bullet damage. Another long duration ability that can be easily built to give Mesa very high, capping at 95% damage reduction. It just only applies to bullets. It's pretty uncommon to be meleeed in Warframe. If you keep moving, it's very difficult for enemies to melee you. So for most intents and purposes, if you also have some armor, if you have anything that gives you armor, and you have this active, you probably won't die to enemies shooting you. You have pretty fantastic damage reduction. Not a ton to say here, just a straightforward, great damage reduction ability. Do enemy rip lines count as melee or ranged attacks? As always, a laser-focused question. Densora, welcome back. Thank you. I don't remember. That's a great question. Asymptomatic also chimes in. Sentients are a good example of a threatening melee opponent. That's a good point. Sure. Yeah. That's a thought. Just to say that in many situations, like against Grineer Corpus, for all intents and purposes, this is damage reduction against everybody. But sentients are definitely a very good point, and I don't know about the ripline thing. Is the ripline a melee or ranged attack? I don't know. That's a great question. Overall, though, a pretty good, pretty straightforward ability. The radius. I do not know what the radius of this ability does. Let's, again, check the wiki. I'm all about the wiki today, apparently. Affected gunfire will instead divert toward a random enemy, if any, within a radius modded by range, and up to 90 degrees from the point of impact. I see. So the bullets will actually ricochet and hit nearby opponents that are close enough to you, basically. I didn't know that. I'm not sure on its own that's particularly significant, but the video, the little movie, demonstrates what looks like the enemy staggering from being hit by that. So maybe it's really good. I don't know. I think it's good anyway. The wiki also says, by the way, Densoro, projectile-based knockdown is resisted, such as the grappling hooks from scorpions and infested ancients. However, knockdowns caused by radial blasts from units such as shockwave mows and heavy gunners will bypass Shatter Shield, as you would kind of expect they would. So it sounds like the answer is yes, it does stop like rip lines and stuff. Scorpions are those Grineer ripline enemies. Okay, and finally, peacemakers. Probably people who've are familiar with Mesa and don't want a long discussion video are saying something frustrated right now about how it took this long to get to the only ability that matters, which, like, fair enough, but that's not really the purpose of this stream. There's like a million videos where you already got what you wanted if you just wanted me to tell you what to do. Peacemakers, you take out two exalted ability pistols. They can be modded separately is what I mean by that. They fire real quick. They fire faster and faster, but in a narrower and narrower area over time. Within that area, the focus area you can see, they auto-aim to nearby enemies. As you can see, they have damage that is affected by strength. They cost actually not that much energy. The energy per second is some, but not, you know. And it does have a minimum field of view. Now you'll see here my Mesa is currently modded for negative range, and I don't actually find that the full negative range field makes it like particularly difficult to aim, but you do have to aim. So if this ability appeals to you because it completely auto-aims, you are kind of removing that. It still doesn't require that much aim, but it makes the reticle small, bigger than a normal reticle, but it's, not big. If you want like total I'm not aiming, then you might want to build range. I don't think I have too much else to say about abilities. Anything else? I'll stay here for a sec. Anything else people want to say about abilities? Ace, you said the skeptic in me does want to point out that both Shooting Gallery and Shatter Shield cannot be recast. The duration of either ability must be depleted. Casting them both at the same time leads to an extended vulnerability window, so staggering them a bit can dodge certain kinds of accidents. That's a great point. When you have damage reduction in a game like Warframe, where you're frequently onslaught assailed by enemies for very long periods of time, having a little window of time where you are not allowed to have your defensive measure, even if it's pretty small, sometimes means you're just going to die then. You will die, it just won't be until this ability runs out, and then when you need to recast it, you could jump in the air or hide behind something or whatever. It's not a big deal, not that Ace is making it out to be, but I do think it's good advice to separate when you cast Shatter Shield and Shooting Gallery, because this will help give you a little bit of breathing room while you recast this. I think that's cool. Yeah. Neat. I also think that having kind of whatever range is a pretty easy stat to dump. I'm not sure you need the amount of duration that would lead to wanting narrow-minded, but apparently past Zandy didn't think that because this build has narrow-minded on it. Past Zandy is from a long time ago. I don't know. It was like 3 years ago. When did I make this build? I don't know. We're gonna unmake it today. In a pre-Helminth world, Pistol Whip says, I chose not to have negative range because it lessened the disarm range from Shooting Gallery, which I apparently depended on. I noted a lot more incoming damage with Narrow-Minded. Yeah, again, I am kind of inclined to agree. I'm not sure I feel like Narrow-Minded makes that much sense unless you bring a Helminth ability that really wants it. Let's, since we're on the subject already and we're just going to go to the augment section after this, let's look at what I built before and think about it. As always, kind of the goal of these videos is that people understand by this point in the video that if you just wanted to be given a build, you shouldn't have watched 30 minutes into a 2-hour-long stream archive about this is for people that want the discussion. Of course, that being said, this build isn't really a recommendation. I haven't really played Mesa maybe at all in like 2+ years. I don't really play this frame currently. In the past, I've played this frame a lot, but I have not played this build in literally years. I don't see why Narrow-Minded makes that much sense here. I guess because fleeting expertise? A playstyle I enjoyed in the past was activating Peacemaker very quickly, running out its reticle narrowing thing, and then swapping off of it. But a recent addition that makes that a more complicated decision is Mesa's Waltz, and I think with that we might as well just talk about the augments now, because that's where this discussion is definitely going. I think you will agree. Eddie, welcome back. Ahoy, mateys. Arg, how you doing? Eddie, I was thinking about renaming the Twitch. Okay, so chat, this is really ridiculous, but look at, just humor me for a sec, okay? This is totally not the right the augment section, but just 1 second. Okay. So when I write archive parlay, Twitch archive parlay, archive, archive, ARRchive. But when you write it as archive, it looks like R chive. Chives. Delicious chives. I love chives. Chives in your yogurt based dressing or topping. Delicious. Chives in your beans and rice. That's something I'm a chive enjoyer. That being said, I've come to think it looks a bit silly. So what do you think about this? Archive. 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 Now it sounds like Archive, which is an area in Magic the Gathering. That's is this worse? Save me from the chive damage. It also looks a little bit like Arg Hive. Hi, like a beehive. Does anybody other than Archive? Mm. Anyway, I mean, this literally doesn't matter at all. I just like this is who I am. Accept me. Anyway, Mesa's Waltz. Hi. Thank you for weighing in. I thank you or I'm sorry. When you would say I'm sorry, try to say thank you instead. But in this case, I think an apology seems relevant. I really am sorry, whether I should be or not. Okay. Um, Densora, you said there's a fun movement glitch with Mesa's Waltz that lets you hang in the air like a helicopter. Probably not your style, but I thought I'd bring it up. If you feel convinced it's a glitch, then I generally avoid talking about that because it might be taken out. But if it's like you aim glide weird, that was something kind of brought up earlier. Pixel mentioned aim gliding shenanigans in the past, which kind of sounds like what you're talking about. I don't know. Let's talk about Mesa's Waltz first. It lets you move while using Peacemaker. Now, the last time I checked, you cannot jump. You can't jump. You can, like, walk, strafe, think of it that way, while using Peacemaker. Not saying that makes it ungood, just that it's not like you can parkour at full speed, full range of motion, but 50% speed, while using while using Peacemaker. If you could like bullet jump and just move as normal, but at 50% speed, that's insanity. I mean, you'd be unstoppable. It's not like it's not good just because you can't do that. But I just want to note that it doesn't let you move like literally however you want. It lets you roll. Feather, you said I use Mesa's Waltz primarily to allow for rolling guard. That is a topic. Rolling guard, yes. That's smart. I think that's cool. Yeah, rolling already gives you damage reduction, so even just being able to roll is good, and you can activate effects by rolling too. Earlier, Asymptomatic brought up something I'm definitely going to come back to about being able to heal yourself while using Peacemaker. There are some people who have a mind to remain in Peacemaker like all the time, like just permanent Peacemaker, or most of the time, a lot of the time, which is a cool idea. And if you were of that mind, you might want a way to restore health while doing that. So that's cool. Um, I would also imagine that doing weird things with like parkour speed, sure, Pixel, would allow you to like maybe move quite a bit while in this form. I'm definitely interested in the idea that you could move fast while using this. Nevertheless, I don't believe they've changed the fact that you can't jump, which for me does make it feel a little limiting. But the enterprising Tenno may find a way to move pretty fast while using. You can roll pretty quick. Like it's not the slowest way of moving. Um, Densora, I think I do. The Densora says, yeah, you can't actually aim glide. But you know that moving backward in the air while meleeing thing that gives you a pseudo aim glide air combo? Yeah, sort of. I think. I don't know. It sounds like this is something folks can look up too. Like if people are really interested in that, it sounds like there's material there. Um, okay, let's do the other augments. But yeah, I would say it's not that I don't think this is great at all. Just that, like, for example, something I've enjoyed a lot in the past is just jumping really high, using Peacemaker while moving because I'm falling, shooting enemies as much as I want, and then ending it. If you do a lot of damage in Peacemaker, there might be little meaning to being able to move while it's active because everything will be dead. So I actually don't think this is that huge of a deal. Now, earlier, there's some what are we gonna say, like ergonomic benefits. And Pistol Whip, earlier you said a bit about this. You said my main thought regarding Mesa is that Mesa's waltz is outstanding quality of life, especially as an Exilus augment, which yes it is. You can put it up here. The primary benefits for me are that A, she can hunt for energy orbs while channeling, and B, she can readjust her positioning, especially with dodge rolls, instead of paying the initial cost of Peacemaker for otherwise nearby casts. Now, on the other hand, I actually love activating Peacemaker over and over again. I love the feeling of like, shh, and then you shoot everyone, and then you shh. It kind of feels like, you know, the thing in movies where they gratuitously over pump action shotguns, so they'll like you don't actually have to do that, it wastes a shell, and then you fire, and then you don't actually have to do that, but you know that thing they do in movies. It gives that feeling of like a sort of reload, you know, fire out the huge smoking magazine from the Peacemakers and then reload. I actually love that feeling, so I generally don't use Mesa's waltz. I love activating Peacemaker. That's so satisfying to me. Because it auto aims too, it adds a kind of different kinesthetic element to the gameplay, where there is like a different thing you're clicking to operate the weapon. I don't know, maybe that's weird for some people, but I actually really like how that feels. Again, personally, when I don't use Mesa's waltz, I generally use Peacemaker by jumping in the air before using it on the enemies below, so I can still move while using it. For a while, I had a thing where we'll have to test this probably. But for a while, I was doing this thing where you would use like a kick gun that had Pax Soar, which would make you float for a little bit and allowed you to activate Peacemaker and float for a sec. Not quite the same as aim gliding, and shoot while up there. I'm not sure if that still works or how that worked in the first place, but it was a thing I used to do. So I'll take a look. I'll remind myself by equipping that. Okay, let's do the other augments, and then we can make some builds. I saw something maybe about the ballistic bullseye one, which I'm gonna have to scroll back up to. Empathetic, you said, as mentioned earlier, ballistic battery and its augment will stick around on single projectiles that linger for a bit. My suggestions are Cedo and Trumna. Oh, very clever. Okay, yeah, I must have skipped over that, but I saw in the corner of my eye a comment about making Pixel. You said I would combine it with those unique and oddly long weapons, things like Azuma or Mutilist Cernos, and then just let that powerful single shot hang around for a while. Bop some Madurai stuff on it too, why not? That is really smart. Yes, you could take advantage of this because the damage bonus does not have a there is no like duration attached to it. Ballistic Bullseye says the shot gains a 50% final critical chance bonus. I'm not sure that that wording is used anywhere else in Warframe, so once again, we're going to look it up. But I would imagine it means the weapon just gets 50% that isn't affected by anything else, which is really good. Mod provides a flat 50 percentage points for critical chance, unaffected by any other bonus. Yeah, that's what it sounds like, and it scales with ability strength. Oh dear. oh goodness. Okay. That seems pretty good. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. You do it on like the Azuma is actually a great example of a weapon that has pretty meager base damage, but the stats are not like so bad. You know, there's nothing horribly keeping this weapon back from doing good damage. Except the base damage. Now, Pistol correctly points out that recently they changed the way that weapons that do things based on their like magazine duration work. You can't make the Azuma have a really big magazine and thus the turret lasts a long time anymore. I'm not sure why they did that because it was incredibly weak anyway. I feel like there was not really a problem there, besides maybe a performance issue, which yeah, anyway. So yeah, but the Cedo is an interesting one. Sure. Empathetic recommended this. The idea is you'd fire out the alternate fire, that bouncing glaive thing it fires, which would get the damage for a long time. I also think another way to effectively play to the strengths of Ballistic Battery and Bullseye is to use something that already isn't affected by multi-shot, so you can maximize its damage without compromise. Another example of this that I don't think has particular synergy, but it does, do that, would be like the throw on the Javlock. On the Javlock throw, multi-shot doesn't affect it, but magazine capacity does make it do more damage per round exploded. This allows you to basically use the multiplier of multi-shot while gaining the benefits of Ballistic Battery. Now, this weapon behaves a little odd, so maybe the math on that isn't that favorable, but it sounds cool. We could give it a try. And this is a weapon that doesn't do like particularly fantastic damage on its radial attack. It could definitely use a significant base damage boost. That sounds cool. But again, there's like nothing about its stats that make it inherently unable to do good damage. It just has kind of mediocre overall base damage. That seems cool. Pistol, you said rip amalgam Javlock magazine warp. Why? What happened? It's still got the magazine capacity. What's the matter? Let's change a few things, by the way, since we're here. This build hasn't been updated in some time. I do have a ribbon that gives magazine capacity, crit chance, and toxin damage. I think I would build gas on this now. In the past, I seemed not to have agreed with that, but that's what I'm gonna do now. And we also have critical delay now. I'm just gonna throw it once, so I don't care if it has lower fire rate, and it's way more crit chance. And then yeah, I'll bring a heat mod, I think. Firestorm. Let's just, sometimes Firestorm has like weird compatibility stuff. Oh no, it totally works. Okay. Banu Grenier, probably the only people that will survive getting this weapon thrown at them once we increase its damage, so sure. 40% status isn't too bad. Yeah, it's probably alright. Amalgam Jagblock Magazine Warp used to have a damage reflection effect when doing a channeled block with Sword and Shield. Oh yeah, right, it's just less interesting. Totally. That being said, the magazine capacity boost is still pretty nice. I think when I equipped this, though, I didn't own... %, and this is gonna max out at 55%. Yeah, I really like the Jablock chat. And, okay, no, we gotta do the rest of the augments. We should fucking... So, we got a whole stream ahead of us to do that. We'll talk more about that stuff in a second. I think that was a great way to introduce Ballistic Bullseye Empathetic. Thanks for bringing that up. To continue, Muzzle Flash. Ooh, I like this one. Shooting Galleries Augment. After 6 kill assists by a player with Shooting Gallery, Mesa's next shot will blind enemies within 12 meters for 6 seconds. This is one of two, I think, really good, but probably you don't need these effects for Mesa that augment her defensive capabilities to, I think, frankly, unnecessary proportions. Kill assist, what does that mean? It basically just means you affect an enemy at all with a damage thing. You touch the enemy at all. A gas status effect AoE, a tiny spare multi-shot bullet. Assists are very generous in Warframe, basically anything. If you do anything to the enemy while, your ally kills it, or you have a Warframe power effect that like helps them kill it, that will often count. For example, Citron's Prismatic Ward Crystal will give you like assist credit for things. And you can also just kill them. Like you could just kill stuff. So it's very easy to get 6 kill assists. It basically just means 6 enemies die and you're not AFK, more or less. And then your next shot blinds enemies within 12 meters, moddable for 3 seconds, 6 seconds, moddable. Yeah, and as Pistol says, just to clarify, like you don't have to play co-op for this to do things. Just to say, it's quite easy to get a thing that counts as an assist. If you want the survivability, I definitely think this ability does a lot of it. You know, you get a lot of blinds that have pretty good base range and duration. The question is just, do you need that? You know, is it really necessary, or is there something else you would prefer? The blind ignores line of sight. I haven't experienced that. You're probably right. Yeah, I don't think it's not good. I'm just not sure do you need this with shooting gallery and shatter shield active, and kind of ditto to staggering shield. This ability makes it very difficult for enemies that fire rapidly to hurt you at all. Heavy gunners, enemy heavy gunners, which ramp up their rapid fire gorgons as they shoot you, become basically useless in combat when you have this mod equipped. The question is simply whether you need that to survive those enemies when you already have 95% damage reduction, and I would recommend something like Arcane Guardian to increase your armor. And my experience is you don't. Like, you really don't. It's not... There's nothing wrong with... If you do, then use it, because it's effective. My experience is I don't think you will if you have, you know, health, some strength. You don't need very much to get this to max damage reduction. And then, like, any way to get armor, Arcane Guardian, it could be... You could just mod armor, although her armor is kind of low. If you make enough health orbs through various quirks of gameplay, you could do health conversion, something like that. There's any number of things you could do. There are other arcanes that would do it too. But the point being, I just don't think you really need those damage measures. It's not a comment on how effective they are. If you want more defenses, I think these are both very good at what they do. I just don't think they're entirely necessary. I feel like that's already a strength of Mesa's. Also note that at least the Prime, I think normal Mesa too, has a better than average base health as well. That's not just because I have the Umbral set. Or base health is a little higher than average as well. I really don't think... I would try to survive without these if you only want to equip them because you think you need them. You may be pleasantly surprised that you don't. I thought about putting muzzle flash on my Umbra, but I'm like, if the enemy's brain turns off when their gun jams, does the blind really help? That's another question. I agree, Densoro. There's a question about whether this does anything that often for people that have shooting gallery active. That being said, I could imagine in 4-player co-op this could be kind of good. Or, you know, where I've had a good time with this, actually, playing with really new players. Like, my partner started playing Warframe 4 or 5 months ago, and when we played a lot together at the beginning, I used this a lot, which was really effective. Just a whole, like, several layers of crowd control to keep enemies at bay when needed. That can be pretty effective. Do also note that shooting gallery is Mesa's Helminth ability. So while Mesa you might consider this to be overkill survivability on Mesa, you can put this and its augment on other frames too. That might be very... I don't know about shooting gallery by itself, but with muzzle flash too, that could be kind of good. Blinding bullets with that range on kind of whoever. Cool. Yeah, maybe, yeah. And I think this ability already isn't a very substantial damage increase, so even if that reduces when you share it with another frame, I don't think it really matters. Augments? That's it for augments. That's it for me about augments. Ace, you said if I would put on staggering shield, adaptation would be my preference in that slot, though I do rely heavily on health and armor tanking, and that makes adaptation work more holistically for me. Sure, that's another point. If you would put on staggering shield, you could consider just adding more damage reduction instead. Again, my 2 cents is that I find it hard to believe somebody would want Shatter Shield at 95% and adaptation and Arcane Guardian. That seems like, oh, you're definitely not going to die, but And indeed, adaptation covers you against something that staggering shield doesn't, which is what if many enemies shoot you one time rather than one enemy shooting you many times. Again, my big point about staggering shield is just that the only enemy that would have had enough sustained damage to still kill you with this amount of damage reduction now can't, a heavy gunner. So I don't think you need any of that, but that's just my experience. If you want survivability, you have got some Gadurn options, don't you? I think that's it for that. I think we should talk a little bit about Peacemaker, actually. Let's do a little split to talk about Peacemaker stuff. Yes, let's. I think that makes sense. Regulators Prime in this case, if you must. Let's look at the base stats. I haven't rebuilt this weapon in a long time too, so it'll be cool to look at again. Let's do this. As you can see, the crit chance is fine. It's got a nice crit multiplier, 3x crit multiplier. The status looks low, 10%, but the fire rate is 14.8 and ramps up from there. You will do some status output. The spread of statuses is even enough that you're not going to get like a ton of slash. The weapon counts as a secondary, so you have those mods available. Yeah, let's go back to here. Now you'll notice on this build that I had built ahead of time, forget about the specific combination of elements. It was before we had galvanized fusion. Forget about that stuff. But you'll notice that I didn't use Hornet Strike. The reason I didn't use Hornet Strike is that at the time, my understanding of the way that Peacemaker gave you damage multiplier was that it gave you base damage, essentially. Basically, the strength is Hornet Strike in this case. So I wasn't keen to add more. Now, it's still damage. Like, just because you're adding damage on top of a way you already have damage, instead of adding a new damage multiplier, doesn't mean it is bad. It's just a suggestion that if you have something that gives you similar damage, but it's not a multiplier you already have, that's probably better. So that's why I didn't immediately slap on Hornet Strike. It's pretty easy to test because it's literally just damage, unlike most other effects, like an element or something. There can be idiosyncrasies. You can't just A/B test, like shoot the same enemies one time with one and then the other. But Hornet Strike is literally just damage, so you absolutely can do that. That being said, let's build it really quick. I think that's reasonable. You likely wouldn't build a lot of the mods that differently depending on how you use the weapon. So let's do that. Emily, welcome back. How goes the gunslinging? Pretty good. We spent a lot of time talking through Mesa's abilities, other than Peacemaker, mostly because I think that people might enjoy that for this frame. I think a lot of people are not having trouble getting effectiveness out of this Warframe, but might be interested in something different. So we took more time than normal doing that. Now we're talking about regulators a bit, building these guys. Then I want to do a little segment on direction, like we kind of already did, but I'll explain when we get there. Then we'll break, and then there's a build that Asymptomatic recommended with heat stacking that I want to try. So let's do these. Pistol Whip, you said Peacemaker has a fixed energy cost per second. Fire rate mods do not cause her to spend more energy. Therefore, I consider fire rate to be one of the more important stats. I like that, and then there's part of it I take issue with. The weapon doesn't have limited ammo, and it does charge fixed energy per second. So as Pistol Whip says, there's no penalty for firing more at a time, but that doesn't make fire rate any better of a damage multiplier mathematically. It just means it doesn't have the implicit drawback it normally has. Let me explain. On this weapon, the magazine is big, but there is a reload speed eventually. So if I put on fire rate, and let's say it's, we'll just do fire rate. Whatever, gunslinger. If I don't have any other fire rate, this makes me do 72% more damage because if I don't have any other fire rate. I do the same damage I was doing 72% faster. Now, effectively, it's going to be an even bigger damage increase because I get my status sooner as well. It may make it even better than that. But anyway, about that much damage. Over time, though, it will end up being docked in effectiveness because I have to reload more often, right? So it isn't quite as much of a damage increase. By how much varies. If you kill everything before needing to reload, and then reload while everything is dead, well, it didn't cost you any damage per second then, you know? But you get the idea. In theory, fire rate is a little worse than it looks like it is, you know, all things being equal, because you do need to eventually reload. All that's happened with the regulators is that you do not need to reload. So while it's true that fire rate has good synergy with this ability, it doesn't make it any mathematically better than it looks like it is. It just makes it as good mathematically as it looks like it is. You're free to use fire rate without worrying about any other peripheral consequences, but that doesn't make it give you like more of a mathematic advantage. It just means it really does give you that much damage. That's all I was going to say. So for example, 90%, yeah, it's good. But if you have other things that also give you like a source of, you know, around 90% damage increase, fire rate isn't better just because this weapon has no penalty for running fire rate. It's still, everything just still gives you damage, you know? That's all I was trying to say. Great Jedi, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself so far. Hope you have a good one. See you later. Does the aim reticle shrink faster with high fire rate? I don't remember. That's a good question. We'll have to keep an eye on that when we go test. And of course, fire rate does also mean your status output goes, like, it approaches crazy pants. So definitely something to think about too. Let's put on multi-shot. Does the galvanized diffusion on kill effect work? I guess we'll find out. Again, note that Hornet Strike may still be an effective choice, even though the like strength basically is base damage on this weapon. It like may or may not be, you know, effective. Crit mods, I want that. Yep, yes. Crit mods, yes. We'll do that. Status. We'll talk about this after the break, but I'm going to put heat on as an element. Other status mods? I don't know. I tend to choose Bane of Grenier effects, but I'm not sure. Let's keep working with the space we have. If there's fire rate here, another thing I wanted to recommend was potentially using Arcane Velocity. It says on critical hit, 90% chance, basically whenever you crit, you get 120 fire rate for pistols. A lot, really unusually high even for the fire rate arcanes. And because you already have high damage from building strength on Peacemaker, if you've done that, I think this is an unusually good choice here. Actually, since we're here, and I'm going to put Growing Power here, a quick note about Pistol Amp, because I kind of brought it up before. I don't even own it, because that's what I think about it. So let's pull that up. Pistol Amp. Let's take a look at that. It says pistol damage increased 27% damage. I think that this is a good example of sort of synergy syndrome. It sounds like, you know, surely this is good and not completely pointless, and therefore it is good on Mesa, because Peacemaker's regulators count as a secondary. But it isn't very powerful, because the damage increase is just the same as Hornet Strike and Strength, so that's very little. It doesn't give you 27% more of all of your damage, it just adds to those ways you already have hundreds of percent of damage. So yeah, that's why this is not mathematically very powerful. You'll see it recommended a lot by people who must not know that. That being said, Growing Power, which gives you strength for your other abilities, and also gives you, I think, probably a larger damage increase than Pistol Amp. It's the same amount of strength. That should give you more base damage and more of everything else affected by strength. So if you want, like you want pistol amp, you really do just want more damage, I would certainly at least use growing power. I would consider that. Um, Now, as a final kind of build prompt before we move on, we're going to talk about helmet abilities and making a build, but we're going to take the break pretty soon. Note what Asymptomatic and Red Drone are excited about. Peacemaker is an exalted ability. It's a Warframe ability that summons a weapon, which means it counts as a Warframe ability. So it can trigger things that normally you're not meant to trigger with a gun. Arcane Continuity, for example, says abilities that inflict a toxin status effect will also apply a corrosive status effect. I would assume that that works on Peacemaker, on the regulators, but this isn't normally supposed to work with weapons. You know, it's balanced to be generally powerful. When an ability inflicts like probably not that many toxin statuses. So this is a way that regulators can be very strong. Some of the Archon mods that have synergy with inflicting an element, you can inflict that element very fast. In fact, let's if that works, we'll try it after the break. But if that does work, let's just go look at the Archon mods. I don't have all of them, and talk about what just give some possibilities. And it's here that I think I'll break actually and do the what I'm sort of calling the direction part of the stream. Just something that I've been meaning to do more lately. I basically answer people's questions for a living, indirectly or directly, however it may be. And that means that I'm in the business of deciding quickly, often being prompted on the spot to answer a question and deciding quickly what is the best way I can answer this question right now. Like I have a kind of unknown amount of time, often not that much. What is the best way I can answer this question with what I currently understand, with how I currently think in this situation with no prep? Like I'm right now, possibly taking a moment to think about it. And so that's what I'm going to do. I think that if you like playing Mesa, or you're a person who wants Mesa build stuff, you know, it's worth considering that things that you would normally think were obvious recommendations, it might not really make sense here. Somebody just watched 1 hour of someone talking about Mesa abilities and stuff. Is it really a good recommendation for that person to just say, oh, you can do a ton of damage with Peacemaker like this? You know, they could have watched like 5 other YouTube videos in this time that all told them how to do that shorter, because the benefit of this stream is meant to be to give you ideas of your own, or like a lot of tools in one build, right? So that's, by the way, that's not to say that I think this isn't a cool idea, or we're going to talk about Archon Vitality in a sec. It's not really prompted by anything you all said. I was planning to say this from the start. Just that if the goal is to help the player have fun, I think it's worth analyzing what somebody might be having fun doing with Mesa and going from there, and also trying to cover things that other people haven't covered as much, or a recommendation maybe other people didn't give. I feel like saying that might seem a little rote, like some of you might be thinking, well, we know that. But I do think it's worth taking the time to point out now and again, because my approach to some frames might be different. I won't always have a very broad approach either. For example, the next Warframe we're going to do is Mirage, and I don't play Mirage a lot because I don't find Mirage's design very fun. I don't like the way that her survivability works in particular. We'll get into it, you know, when we do Mirage. I don't really enjoy Mirage. Mirage is designed, you could say, not for me. I actually have some game design critiques generally, but again, we'll get to those in a few weeks. My point is simply that when I cover Mirage, it's probably worth me stopping to say, I don't like this frame, so I might make something really niche that's kind of weird and doesn't really fulfill what people normally get excited about this frame because I do not like her. You know what I mean? And you could know that going in. There are people who feel that way and might say, hell yeah, like give me something that isn't really playing Mirage, because I don't like Mirage but own Mirage and want to play Mirage sometimes. Sure, right? But other people might think that seems kind of pointless. Like, why not just play Mirage, you know? So I do think that it's partially an admission of perspective, but also partially to just frame what we're trying to do sometimes a little bit. That's all. So, for example, for me, I think that an interesting perspective on Peacemaker or Regulators is to assume it does infinitely high damage. Like, it will kill any enemy you shoot it at if you mod it fully. If you have the amount of choices that we're discussing in this stream, you can assume it will be able to kill the enemies you shoot at it. So things that merely allow it to do more damage linearly, like they don't make it do damage in a different way, they just make it do more damage, are not that interesting to me. I just feel like it isn't that. There are a million ways you could do that, basically. However, I am pretty interested in the idea of it being damage over time, toxin maybe, but heat. This is the thing that Ace is going to talk about during the break, or you did an ARRchive parlay on, so I'll talk about. It's Vitality, it's the mod Vitality. It says status effects from abilities that deal heat damage will be applied twice. Now again, abilities that deal heat damage. Normally, how are you applying so much heat? There are a few ways. But I mean, not as fast as with Regulators, with a bunch of fire rate. And then you apply twice as much? Whew. Yeah. So if you want that, and I think I do want that, then yeah, get it in there. Cool. And there are others just to, while we're here, you see this is a stretch that says abilities that deal electricity damage restore 2 energy per second over 5 seconds. You could, this is probably disabled by channeling Peacemaker, but you could trigger that a lot. Does it stack? No. Enemies killed by cold abilities have a 10% chance to drop an energy orb. Inflicting cold really fast doesn't really make this effect better, right? But you would probably do, cold. Does that count as a cold ability? And I think Archon Continuity is a great example of the concept as well. Abilities that inflict toxin will apply corrosive. You'll apply a lot of corrosive. Probably very quickly you'll apply max corrosive stacks. If you wanted just more damage, this is like boy howdy. Is one of many ways you could make it do more than enough damage. I'm not sure I would pick continuity on Mesa. I think one of the benefits of Archon Vitality is I'm definitely going to put Vitality on my Mesa already, and so I don't really pay anything for that synergy, provided I just quit out of Warframe impulsively from the Drifter camp again, because it does that thing. So that's me today. Empathetic, you said, no cold status effects needed. You only need to have Regulators dealing cold damage and it'll count. Right, it technically doesn't say status effect. But yeah, just to say, it's worth considering that you can trigger those effects very fast or at will with in a way that most other, they're worded to work with abilities, so most other frames can't trigger them so freely as the Regulators will. We should be back. Hold on. The reason I quit out immediately is because when you're at the Drifter camp, I think of it mentally as being an emission, but in this situation only, you're not like in a relay or something, so hitting this exits the game rather than putting you back into orbit. To go back into orbit, in this case only, I believe, you have to click here. If you can't tell, I really don't like that. It's mentally frustrating to me. I would argue the game teaches you to mess that up. It may make sense. It might even be kind of cool in some ways, but the game trains the player to muscle memory that mistake. I'm not embarrassed that it's me, by the way. Like I'm an idiot all the time. It's fine. So definitely not all the discussion that I want to have about companions and stuff. There's more to say, but I just wanted to do a little section on purpose and talk about that. Yeah, I'm totally gonna level up Archon Vitality just for this occasion and have basically no credits afterward. But far be it for me to not make mad heat stonks. And then we'll go from there after the break. Actually, this is a perfect time to do that because the archive parlay is about what we just talked about, and then we'll what do you... Mesa's decided that she's looking over here, so I guess that's staying that way. That's fine. Ace, you said, notably, the Archon mods provide their riding effects at full strength at rank 0. As long as it's slotted at all, the bonus works. Indeed, I do think you would very likely want to level them up, but it does cost a lot of resources, so the enterprising player that wants to just try it out may choose to simply put it on. That's a great note. Some people might just want to try it, and you don't have to level it up all the way for that. For example, I mean, this is my job, so I'm gonna just do it. But something that occurred to me when I ranked up Archon Vitality just then was, am I gonna use this on any other Warframe? And then I thought, well, for me, that actually is a good enough reason for me to level it all the way up. But for a lot of players, they probably don't want to spend that amount of resources for just one build on just one frame. It depends how you look at it, you know? Anyway, Mesa's looking at the boat. That's neat. That is kind of nice. And at the boat in the sky as well, the railjack thing. Let's break. I just want to thank a few people for supporting the show, and then we're gonna take a quick break. Feather of the Crow, Audio Forces, and Melody Warp, thank you for the recent subs. Thank you for supporting the show. You are one of the primary ways that I get paid for doing this. We don't really deal with sponsors that much here. Generally, it's you and I, and we do that partially to keep a more focused discussion environment where we can talk quite focused, quite targetedly, I don't know what word I want there, about stuff like this. So I really appreciate your support. You are why this type of thing is able to exist. So thank you. It means a lot. That the people that are able or willing to pay a little bit is why it can work. So thank you. And thanks to all the new follows. We have not had anyone new today, but we are going to stream again a couple hours after this stream, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, or after prime time if you watch prime time. They offered to give us a raid. I said yes. And yeah, we'll probably be welcoming in a lot of new follows around then. So anyway, thanks for the support. Talk to you all in a few. Hello and welcome back to my Twitch ARRchive parlay. This is the part of the show where we take a quick break, hit the restroom and such, and past Zandy here, I'm supposed to entertain you by answering questions submitted by folks who watch previous streams. This one is from Asymptomatic, who asks for thoughts on damage over time from heat. Let's just say big DOT. Unlike other status like Slash and Toxin, Asymptomatic continues, heat has one damage clock that compounds and refreshes with each stack, colloquially known as heat stacking. I've semi-recently been challenging how many status procs can I fit in before the next damage tick. Mesa's Peacemaker comes to mind, by literally doubling the quantity of procs through Archon Vitality, and Primed Heated Charge lends high fire rate secondaries a hand. Yeah, they'll proc relatively more heat because it's a lot of elemental heat damage. Sure. Yes, this whole subject is interesting because in Warframe we have a mix of smaller enemies and bigger bosses. It's weird, but I've been thinking recently about how in Warframe, because it's a horde shooter, we more frequently fight like big swarms of enemies than in other games. I think as a weird consequence of that, they're kind of harder in a sense. We more often have a like meaningful damage spongy enemy in a group of normal enemies that are supposed to be easy relatively to dispatch. In a lot of games, you fight basic enemies and then a big boss. In Warframe, maybe you could think of it as there's sort of a less of a gap. The basic enemies are a little bit more hardy because they're not so basic, they're the main part of the game. And then bosses are, I would argue, kind of less part of the game, and so they're, you know, still more durable, but definitely not as durable. I think because the game is balanced around being able to dispatch the hordes of enemies, damage over time effects are relatively strong because they want to feel relevant against enemies with relatively low health, which means they do relatively high damage. Confusingly, I think this results in them being very, very overpowered when you stack them up against bosses. For a long time, they were limited by the fact that you could only stack them to 10. Heat, you could view as a way around this. So the idea of stacking up a ton of heat against an enemy that can actually take that amount of damage is good. I'm on board with that. I think what appeals to me is having that still work against, you know, your basic rank and file enemies, but that's probably not too hard because it means that if they survive a few shots, well, they're taking enormous heat damage over time. And if they don't, well, they're dead, aren't they? So it's okay. Indeed, I've been thinking lately that because we have so much power in Warframe right now, even though the state of a lot of status effects hasn't changed that much, the relative viability of damage over time effects and stuff like gas damaging an area but not for a particularly aggressive amount of damage has gotten better because we just do so much more damage than we need, or some of us can do so much more damage than those of us need, that it's practical to build damage types that are not better now, but we don't need their benefit now. Another way I've kind of thought of this in the past is I use Bane of Grenier mods on most weapons of mine. When there's a free slot, generally I put in a Bane of Grenier. Now I don't have that mod slot against Corpus and Infested, but I just don't need help against Corpus and Infested. They're just not hard to kill for my account. I would rather even the playing field by making Grenier armor, which is the enemy's most effective defense against my big damage, relatively less of a threat by getting a big damage boost against them only. I guess the weird hole is against Corrupted and Sentience. I do way less damage. Corrupted have some Grenier units that don't count as Grenier, so they're, yeah. But that's fine. You know, once in a blue moon when I'm on the steel path fighting Corrupted, yeah, it's not good. But it doesn't happen that much. So yeah, I'm definitely into this idea. I think that where Warframe is right now, it's definitely reasonable to get the damage, like the raw damage from somewhere else, and build as if enemies will survive, instantly killing anything that you don't need to build against. And then when an enemy does survive, suddenly your build kind of turns on and you do tons of damage. It's why I often don't recommend building differently against lower level enemies, because in many cases it just doesn't matter. They will instantly die to your build optimized for higher level enemies, so there's no need. That really only comes up when there might be a build where if you build it a certain way, it will one-shot low-level enemies, but that damage will be negligible at higher levels. That's a thing sometimes, but very rarely. I would say broadly it's not useful, in my opinion, to think about building differently against weaker enemies. I would just build the thing that does the most effective damage and then slaughter everything. That being said, there are some assumptions based on what our kind of baseline damage output is. And I agree that heat is definitely something to think about even more now. It's great for its, melting armor effect as well, but the damage over time is definitely relevant. This is not something I've played with too much, so I'm happy you brought it up. Maybe we start making a build around that. Folks, if you enjoyed this, you can ask a question to these segments using the link I'm posting in chat right now. Just click the link and you can submit a question that will be recorded in the form. I clean out the form before every stream on Thursdays, so I'll answer your question the next time we stream, this day of the week, which will probably be next week. With that, on with the show. You have the thank yous to the folks who are supporting the stream. Eddie Stardust, thank you very much for being my most recent patron. You're a $9 patron, which means you get Parley, which is kind of a long version of the ARRchive Parley we just did. People can pay to get me to do about a half-hour one on the topic of their choice. If you want to just listen to those, if that just interests you, they're on the Pantaloon Saloon channel. And Asymptomatic, thank you for the recent $52.10 tip, both the biggest tip this period and the most recent. Thank you very much for your support. It means a lot. You are also a Parley purveyor. You've been doing Parley for years, so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, this is the only reason it's possible to do this, is because some people are willing to pay to enable it. So as you're able, it means a lot to me. Cool. Welcome back. Let's make a break and make a big bongo heat stacking build. Yeah. We were talking before the break about making a build revolving around using Archon Vitality. Little dip to strength there, but not a huge deal. To stack status effects with heat with regulators, which count as an ability because they're a weapon created by a Warframe power, and they'll stack twice as much. So here we can potentially look at things differently as different multipliers. So fire rate is a multiplier for heat damage output, and also this mod doubles heat, status output. I don't know the math behind how heat stacks. This seems like a good opportunity to read the wiki page on heat. Heat status effect. The status effect of heat damage is ignite. Blah, blah, blah. The armor effect. It also deals a tick of damage every second for 6 seconds. Repeated application of heat does not stack tick damage in the same way as other damage overtime effects. Instead, a heat proc both adds a stack and refreshes the duration of all currently active heat stacks. Now, the reason that I mention this is because it means that status duration, I believe, isn't going to cause it to do more damage. As long as heat status is kept refreshed within the 6-second effect duration modified by status duration. So status duration would only make it so we could take longer than 6 seconds between applying heat. This build, I don't think, is that interested in that. It would mean that once we're, I guess, done stacking, it will last longer, but where we're going, nothing is going to survive that damage. So status duration will not be relevant as far as I can tell. Other things that will magnify the heat output, well, multi-shot. I believe that Bane effects will work. So like Prime Expel Grineer will make Grineer enemies take 55% more damage from the heat status. I believe this works on status effects, so that seems logical to include. The crit, well, it won't increase the heat damage, but I feel like it will increase the damage, the raw damage, enough that it's worth considering anyway. Note that if the build is going to do a ton of damage by stacking heat, what about enemies where we wouldn't want to wait that long for the enemy to die? Well, as long as we just build a little bit of normal damage as well, they'll just die to the upfront damage, because we haven't made very many compromises on upfront damage yet. If we get base damage from the strength, and we still have multi-shot, and we still have elemental damage, and we still have fire rate, it's basically just the normal damage build if we only added the crit mods. So it might be reasonable to make a concession to the upfront damage so that basic enemies where we don't want to be stacking heat, that we want them to just die, butchers, whatever, will just die because it will increase the build's damage by so much. Yeah, what else you put on here, I'm not entirely sure. We want a lot of heat status. Could increase the status chance, I suppose. A little would go a long way, too. For example, it doesn't look like a lot, but if you just put on Scorch, it goes from, it doesn't look like a lot, again, 10 to 16%. But when you think about it, what we've really done is what it says in the mod. We have 60% more status chance. Whatever status output we had, we now have 60% more of it. Is that something this build wants? I think yes. Like, it sounds like yes. Along with fire rate, Archon Vitality, multi-shot, etc. This is yet another multiplier to our total amount of heat that we're doing. And better yet, it does add a little bit of heat damage itself. Again, 10% doesn't look like a lot, but we're doing that 28 times per second, and this is before arcane velocity. Moving that up to 16%, 28 times per second, is actually a big difference. It's a 60% difference. So I wouldn't worry too much about the status chance being low. The status output is very high. This is why nearly every weapon benefits from a lot of status, because there are very few weapons in Warframe that both do not fire very quickly and do not hit very many enemies per shot, yet otherwise do very good damage. There just are very few weapons that meet those criteria. All the stats are great except the status, and it doesn't shoot fast, and it doesn't hit a lot of enemies at once. There's like very, very few weapons in Warframe that fit that description, which is why generally the status chance of a weapon is made irrelevant by some other quality. Asymptomatic, you said, briefly dredging up Amalgam Furax body count. Rate of fire in an off-weapon, non-arcane slot. Amalgam Furax body count. It's been long enough that I don't know what that is. What the hell? This is a combo duration mod for the Furax that I forgot existed because it came out like 3 years ago that gives 45% fire rate to secondaries. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Put that on there. We have one slot free. Could do more status. It used to be AoE radius, so not that long ago. I was gonna say, I feel like yeah, it used to give blast radius to launchers. My brain was like, it didn't used to do that. Thank you for saving my sanity. Like, I feel like I would have used that many times if that's what it did. Thank you. Because we didn't necessarily misremember that. I see. It's worth considering Lethal Torrent, I think. If what the weapon wants is just more output, this gives, we have a lot of multi-shot, but more multi-shot, and we have a lot of fire rate, but more fire rate. I think given the relative, we have a lot of multi-shot already and a lot of fire rate, it feels like it would be better to do more status, like get more status chance instead, and we can't really get more heat. Galvanized shot comes to mind. This is a lot of status chance. I'm not sure the secondary effect is that relevant on this build, but neither is it bad. It's a decent amount of damage, base damage. Remember, this build is getting that from strength at the moment. That's why we don't have pistol Hornet Strike. But this would give it some, on kill, per status type on the target. Now this weapon is overwhelmingly going to do heat and then like some impact, maybe an occasional puncture or slash. The fire rate is immense, so you will get these on heavier targets. This might be okay. Remember, you don't need to have statuses on the enemy, like a lot of them, to get the on-kill effect. It just gives you more damage against enemies that have those on them. And again, if our main reason for putting this on is status, and then it's just like a bonus that it increases the weapon's upfront damage, that seems kind of good. I guess we could just look at like other status chance, if that's what we were going to do. Hemorrhage. Impact status effects have a 35% chance to apply slash. That might be okay on this weapon. I feel like our heat stacking thing is kind of bypassing that a lot. Embedded catalyzer. Not really more status than galvanized shot though. So yeah, not so much because I think that the damage is so huge, but this is basically the biggest remaining source of status chance anyway, and you get the damages like a nice bonus. That being said, I don't have room, so we're gonna do this. Oh, also, embedded catalyzer. Thank you for noticing. Fact aside, embedded catalyzers on ability cast while aiming, which you can't do with the regulators. Thank you, Pistol Whip. You can't use this anyway. I was just comparing other status mods. You could use Sure Shot, but again, Galvanized Shot is only 10% less, and then you get the bonus effect. I just don't think that that's... I don't think you really need 10% more status chance in exchange for actually probably pretty substantial base damage. I think this is a great mod here. But I don't have room, so it doesn't matter. Furax, these are literally just giving you a stat stick that gives you fire rate. Could we spend time during this stream making a build for this weapon? We could. Do I think that's a good use of relatively limited time? No. What might you build on the weapon if you were so inclined? Well, if I recall, this weapon has some kind of weird relationship to. Doesn't it have like initial combo count or something? That's what it is, right? Again, we're not going to spend that long on this because not because it might not be worth using, simply because that's not the focus of this stream. We're going to make use of Furax body count, and you could do whatever you want with this. But yes, my memory served correctly. This weapon does have an initial combo of 20, so you may wish to use a heavy attack build. Let's, as an exercise, since I don't think it'll take that long anyway, let's just decide where you might put Amalgam Furax body count if you made that heavy attack build. So you have more or less this, and you're going to add Furax body count. I guess Life Strike, if the build doesn't plan to rely on this weapon, then I'm not sure. And kind of categorically, there's other initial heavy attack weapons. So on a build where I would use this, I must not be as focused on my melee weapon. Therefore, I am apparently willing to forgo some heavy attack effectiveness for, fire rate on my secondary. If I didn't want that, I could just use the, what's that one weapon? The hammer. Fragor Prime. Fragor Prime also has initial combo count, so I would just duplicate this build but use it on that weapon if I wanted just that. This is a weapon I would pick when I'm, yeah, sure, like I can kill stuff with this if I need to, but I want this effect. The combo duration doesn't synergize at all with this heavy attack build, which is too bad, isn't it? I don't care, and there isn't enough room on the weapon. Asymptomatic, thank you for gifting me 115 or some forma, because as you can see, I'm using them at a substantial, prodigious rate. There we are. Look at that. Little side note about the like hovering with regulators thing, or with a pack soar that I was going to show you. Let's just quickly check if that like works the way I remember it does. It's been a while. As I said at the beginning of the show today, I haven't been using Mesa very much personally, so I do want to kind of go back and check that. But yeah, as Emily says about the Furax Wraith, like I have no intention of ever using these as a melee weapon on this build. Just to say that if you, I mean, there are open mod slots. If you wanted to just put a heavy attack build on there, there's not really any like drawback to doing that. You might as well. Yes, so let me show you this thing. So you shoot in the air, and you see you kind of hover for a bit. You get a kind of float effect from Pax Soar. This is any kit gun with Pax Soar. Like so. Now, in my memory, it was the case that you could shoot a sec, and then you kind of retain that float effect. You see, you kind of like maintain your upward vector and just sort of float there. We'll compare that to if I just bullet jump up and do this, and you can see I fall quicker. Again, to some people that might not be significant, but I love using regulators that way. That's my gas. That is my one gassy boy. I think that's quite fun. You get a nice little hover. Again, when you go straight up, it's more prominent. That wasn't that long. That was quite a bit longer. So again, might not be a difference to you, but if you don't use Mesa's Waltz, which I don't, I actually think that's fairly significant. I think it's kind of fun. Takes a little getting used to, don't get me wrong, but I just haven't done this in a long time. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool. Enemies do seem to be less accurate in Warframe if you are not on the ground. So I don't know, I think that's kind of neat. Anyway, that's what I meant by that. Now you'll probably want to use a secondary for Pax Soar if you're compelled by that benefit, because we've suggested quite a few primaries that would have nice synergy with Ballistic Battery. So it's so far, it seems like having the secondary slot hold that is better. just going to catch back up on chat a little bit more. And what we need to do now is demonstrate the heat stacking thing against an enemy that has enough health to actually take that damage. I want to first look at it in the simulacrum and then go into Steel Path, which is where I would imagine this is going to give you the most value. In fact, I would say this is kind of like a break to test damage potential, and then like we'll and then we'll do more, you know, kind of cursory build stuff. Just gonna catch up on some stuff from chat after we do that. So again, here for the purpose of demonstration, let's just take off. Well, you'd have your Sentinel. Remember, the Sentinel here is going to be using something like the Vergless, which will apply viral with what I have built on it anyway. And Worm isn't, we'll talk about this more later, but Worm isn't the worst idea because the Precept will yeet enemies away from you in melee. You can technically be meleeed. Now, it doesn't work on Sentients. I think they're immune to this still, which are some of the more threatening enemies that might do that. But anyway, you also, some infested will do a toxin cloud over you. This does not get negated by shoot, why did my brain fart on the name Shatter Shield? So you may decide that you care about that. I'm not sure that really matters that much. Okay, so let's do some, yeah, like level 150 is great, actually. And I'm just gonna activate 3 and then press 4 and go to town. That weren't bad. That just wasn't bad. That's not bad. Let's see the ballistic battery damage on the Javelok too. So you can see that the damage on the Bombard there ramped up very quickly. Initially, the damage of the actual shots wasn't very high, but the burning damage was very, very high, and so they extremely rapidly began taking more and more damage. And toward the end, you know, in the final second, we did almost all of the damage that the effect did. Now, Ballistic Battery is fully charged. I'm just curious, at the level where you even care about that damage, does this do meaningful damage? Not to that enemy, anyway. Let's... Oh, because I didn't activate Ballistic Battery. Okay. That was a direct hit, so I'm not sure that's entirely fair, but... yeah, hold on. Let's, charge it back up. Note the fire rate. And remember that we don't necessarily have, like, the final build. Everything is set in stone or anything. We could still modify a few things. Now I'm gonna activate this and throw. Was pretty, I mean, the Sentinel's helping, but they would in a real mission. That was pretty substantial damage to a level 150 armored enemy. And remember that these don't count as Grineer because they're corrupted. So the damage from the Bane of Grineer mods on my weapons isn't affecting this damage. That's not bad, I don't think. That just ain't bad. That's not bad. Cool. A quick note about the regulators since it came up. Ace, you said, I think Expel Grineer is a bit of a tougher sell in the regulators specifically. Swapping that to Lethal Torrent, for example, affects all factions and probably still gets value. The thing I wanted to demonstrate before addressing that point is just that I'm not sure it matters with the raw volume of damage that the build is already doing. And I'm not expecting a huge performance increase from Lethal Torrent because we have a ton, like 250+% fire rate. So the difference in fire rate is not huge. The multi-shot is maybe a little bit bigger. But one great thing about this build is you're going to have the highest multi-shot once you've killed all the little enemies to ramp up the burning against the bigger enemies. So I don't know. I mean, if you assume this is fully stacked too, that's, you know, you already have around 250, 240. 230? Anyway, multi-shot. So adding 60%, definitely not bad, but I just think the benefit is small enough that it just doesn't feel that bad. And when you are against the relevant enemies for this, I think it will feel really good. So yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable, Ace, but I think I'm gonna keep on the Bane effect for now anyway. Mesa, it is, yes. The idea is that the regulator damage, when built with some bells and whistles, is going to kill any smaller enemy, and you can stack heat very, very fast by using heat mods and Archon Vitality, Asymptomatic suggested. Because the regulators are a weapon that counts as an ability. Normally, Archon Vitality only works with abilities, but the regulators are a way to have a gun count as an ability, and they can have preposterous fire rate. So you can stack heat extremely high, meaning that anything that just doesn't die to them immediately, you're doing an irrelevantly high amount of damage that scales basically indefinitely. You will be able to kill in a matter of seconds anything that doesn't die to the upfront damage. And you don't have to sacrifice much upfront damage. That's another good thing. Let's just go into the Steel Path briefly, and then we'll talk about peripheral stuff. Like, I see a few Sentinel recommendations and Helmet ability recommendations. We haven't talked about Helmet abilities today. Not really, anyway, but there were a few recommendations I thought were cool. We're definitely gonna talk about that. One reason that while we shoot these high-level Grineer, one reason that I didn't talk about Helmet abilities sooner today is simply that I think Mesa is an example of a frame that has 4 relevant abilities, like 4 like good, I more or less want them abilities. And so it's not as I really don't think it's as urgent to choose the Helmet ability. What enemy took that amount of damage? Well, golly, the Steel Path enemies really, you really let yourself go. You got the backup Javelock throw. Not bad. The gas hit wasn't bad. Not crazy, but not bad. And you can see against basic enemies, the regulators are doing plenty of damage. Enemies are dying, mostly before significant heat status stacking is occurring. Have some energy concerns. We can talk about that later. Drakmaster survived my bullet, my fire for like a while before. So I just want to see that again. Not instantaneous, but if these are about the highest level enemy you would need the build to kill, it's I don't think it's that long, Yeah, maybe Zenorek, if you're going to use it the way I am, where you're popping in and out of Peacemaker a lot, that is how I'm using it. But we haven't really done the final pass in the build yet anyway. I might just run more efficiency, for example. Currently not doing that at all. Because I have so much fire rate, that's pretty effective. Well, anyway, we saw how much damage it does currently. So again, as always, you could season to taste. If you want to run a Helmet ability that increases that damage, or build more damage stuff, you could. You could build, maybe more strength would be something to think about. Note that the heat stacking is there more as a way to have a way to scale against enemies that are at a high level. You can't necessarily just build more strength and get more of that. But you can see that this build does make some concessions to do upfront damage that is meaningful against the lower level or the just like more fodder enemies. Pistol Gambit and Target Cracker are not increasing the heat output. So if you are keen on doing that, you might consider removing these and adding, Lethal Torrent. Remember, this build I'm still planning to add Galvanized Shot. And you could add like Hornet Strike, that won't increase the output. You could add more fire rate. There are things you could add if you wanted to upgrade that. Yeah, by the way, I just missed this earlier. Why don't I have Tainted Clip? Yeah, or Tainted Mag. Yeah. Give me those extra rounds. Anyway. Do note that the heat status effect does, as always, burn 50% of the enemy's armor over time. So you are already like meaningfully digging into enemy armor by doing that. Earlier, I had corrosive projection on, which you could consider. Maybe this is really good, actually. Should we do corrosive projection? Because it'll make the heat damage higher, right? The heat status effect ticks are inhibited by armor. Unless I'm crazy. And the heat effect itself does burn some of that off, but then this will remove more. That might feel meaningful. Maybe you should try this. I'm not sure the strength really matters. To me, anyway. Note that Natural Talent is a mod that you can use here that I've been using, though I'm not sure you really need that. My current duration's kind of bad. I think I'm going to add maybe some duration. I'm not sure. Cool. I mean, I think we've basically talked about the fundaments of the build. I think I am going to use Xenoric actually. So let's talk about other stuff like additions, final notes for the build. Like companion synergies, thoughts for companions. If my heavy weapon isn't already my Mazelon, then I'm going to swap to it because I somehow don't have that on most of my loadouts right now. I really don't like the default Furex Wraith appearance, so I replaced it with these Bell Fists. Ooh. Well, that's badass, but I'm definitely keeping the ringers for this loadout. Javlock, but again, for ballistic battery shenanigans, should you decide you want to do that, you may consider the Cedo was recommended. I thought that was a cool idea, the alt fire of the Cedo. The Javlock seems like a really great use case to me, so I'm quite keen on keeping it, but yeah, like the Cedo is a cool idea as well. Show while holstered for particularly festive regulators. Hell yeah. Ooh. Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. I'll change the fashion some other time, but hell yes. Like that's so good. There's a couple different regulator skins too. Like you can go for now we're cooking with gas. I mean, all right. There's some you can cobble together some spicy boys there. My current Mesa fashion is quite safe. It's very old. I'm definitely going to update it. I just don't think that's the best use of our time with limited time during today's stream. But I will talk a little bit about Mesa fashion in that setup. Let's talk about companions a little bit more. I saw earlier, Eddie, you said, can I chip in with the Taxon as a recommendation for Mesa's Sentinel? It will grant her a lot of additional effective health with the Taxon's Overshield generation. Sure, this is a good use case for that, yep. Molecular conversion gives you 200 shields into overshields if you have full shields. This seems innocuous, but on frames that have very high effective damage reduction, which affects shields, like Shatter Shield does, you end up gaining a pretty ridiculous amount of effective health, and this happens pretty often. The cooldown is quite short. On Mesa, for example, with 95% damage reduction, you gain, the effective health this gains you is 20 times the amount you get. It's like gaining 4,000 shields, if you want to think of it that way, provided you have Shatter Shield up. You may not want survivability at all, but if you do, I do think this is a great choice. Yeah. Nothing fancy, but I think that's smart. Yeah. Another thing I'll briefly call out is I think the Nautilus is sort of relevant here. A thing about the Nautilus is that grouping enemies together is really powerful in Warframe most of the time, because it lets you affect them with all sorts of nastiness. But this doesn't happen when you want it to, it just happens, Having a frame that can, at a moment's notice, just do the thing, which you'd argue maybe regulators, you can do that. maybe this is a good place for that. I don't know, but I thought to recommend it. I don't know. I like the worm idea. I recommended worm earlier because you get the yeet if enemies would come toward you in melee, but a lot of the threat is sentience, and this won't affect them. And like negate is nice here and there. Many of the status effects would be from ranged enemies, which can't really hurt you. So, you know, um, I don't know. Ace, you recommended the mecha set. Um, interesting. Um, sure, I typed in mecha instead. Let's just look at whatever Kubro. Um, hmm. Okay, so what's going on here is the mecha set gives you a mark. When you kill the marked enemy, their status effects spread to enemies within 15 meters, within 30 meters if you have it at max rank. And there's pretty much always a mark. Every 15 seconds you get a mark at max rank mecha set. And then the status effect stack spreads to everything within 30 meters when that enemy dies, when the marked enemy dies. Now, you don't know the marked enemy will have a ton of heat. If the marked enemy is a lesser, weaker enemy, they probably won't have a ton of heat. They'll probably just die, right? But a good amount of the time, without you really doing anything, you'll randomly delete the entire 30-meter radius by having like a tankier enemy get marked, and then everyone gets like 50 million heat statuses and dies, right? Seems pretty sick. Like, that seems good. I don't think that's bad. Yeah, that's cool. So what Kubro or Predacite, and then the other mecha set mods. I think there's room, but let's just look at those. Mecha Pulse. This would pretty much only give Mesa here a stack of the mecha set bonus, because the armor bonus is not likely to be super irrelevant. It may affect a lot of enemies from time to time, so it's 60% armor of her base armor. So imagine that you hit 10 enemies, it'd be 600% of her 125 armor. That's not bad. And it would often hit like 10-ish enemies. You're kind of selling me on this, yeah. And then the other mecha mod is an aura mod. So you give up whatever benefit corrosive projection was giving you. I don't think that's a huge deal. I'm totally sold on the mecha set. I think I'm probably going to take up natural talent. I don't know what I want here, but we'll come back to that later. What source of mecha set dog? So you can pick a Kubro or Predacite for that. Kubros, you could do digging up stuff. Meh. Only really happens in combat, or when you're standing still, not really in combat. There's the stealth. That's never going to be, I'm going to be shooting people. The loot thing, Chessa, making more loot. You can get just the combat one. Minotaur here is a Magi Predacite. And these guys have a sort of charge thing. They charge an enemy and kind of do like radial blind. And then they have like a big finisher hit. Kind of like a brawler companion. This is, I think, a decent Kubro or Predacite, but it's a Kubro to choose when you just want one that is going to brawl in combat a little bit. Now, because of Mecha Overdrive, if we pick a particular primary weapon, the Kubro could do quite significant status output. The Javlok doesn't really do that. But if you picked the Cedo, was recommended earlier, I believe that had really good status. Is that wrong? Oh, but it's status per projectile, so it probably affects it badly because the math is weird. Yep, it does. So yeah, the Javlok is better, but you could hunt around for a weapon. If you want just like you don't care about ballistic battery stuff, you just want the most Kubro status, you can bring the Kuva Comb, which calculates its status kind of odd, giving the Predacite or Kubro massive shared status. This will mean, because they have pure slash damage, that every single time they attack, they inflict a slash status effect, which 43% of the time crits for 10 times its normal damage. So about half of the time, your Predacite will one-shot basically anything in the game, because the slash damage over time will pierce armor. Mecha Overdrive with the Kuva Comb in your primary slot even if you don't use the mecha set, is super ridiculous. Like your Kubro can one shot like level 200 enemies, if they're armored, if they're mostly surviving with armor. That may be a slight exaggeration, but it does an insane amount of damage. You don't really have to build anything in particular. So if you don't care about giving up this slot, that is definitely a thing you can do. I'm not sure I'm going to worry about that too much in this case. I thought maybe we could briefly highlight a predicite we don't normally, because I'll explain why I don't normally highlight it. Endoparasitic vector. It says transmit an endoparasite to an enemy within 30 meters. Tentacles spawn from it. What a novel. Clinging to enemies within 5 meters, slowing them as they move further from the parasite and dealing viral damage per second over 5 seconds. When this released many years ago, I tested it and it didn't really have the targeting to make it usable. It wasn't really usable because it didn't meaningfully target enemies. It didn't really pull them enough. 5 meters is already short. Even if this hit automatically and inflicted viral and had a short cooldown and had, auto homing, it hits automatically. I still don't think it'd be that good, and it didn't do that stuff when I last tested it. So, anabolic pollination gives you toxin damage from your companion if you stand in the cloud, which is not good for this build because you will probably get gas on your regulators. So I wouldn't. You could just not run that, but anyway. And finally, we have the other predicite, the Vizier, which I honestly don't remember at all. This is the one with the healing spores. It farts out a trail of healing spores. The healing is not very large. It just kind of happens, and it heals the companion. So that's something. Acidic spittle. You do corrosive damage. They get blinded. It's only one enemy. I just don't think this is that good. Acidic spittle. So I think my recommendation here would be a Magi predicite, just have a brawler. I don't have that one mod on him though, volatile parasite. This is a thing. I want this on here. I'll put it in the notes. Add volatile. It's a volatile parasite, right? I want that on there. Anyway, yeah. The mecha set. Yeah, that's a good choice, I think. Now, earlier I saw, we don't have that much time, but let's just talk about helmet abilities quickly. One recommendation I saw was if you want healing during Peacemaker, you could run something like Molt with regenerative Molt. And Ace, you mentioned a lot at the beginning of the stream that you liked that. The idea being that you can heal during Mesa's Waltz. Was that the idea? Can you cast helmet abilities during Peacemaker? Is that a thing? You could turn on Mesa's abilities during Peacemaker, I think. But yeah, if you wanted healing during it. Peacemaker currently disables all abilities except Ballistic Battery. I thought so. But anyway, Ace, don't let me put words in your mouth. You recommended regenerative Molt. You could activate it before Peacemaker, have the regen, and then just walk around with duration. I'll just pull up that augment quick. Yeah, so this duration is moddable. You could run duration and have like a lot of molt reconstruct. Is that different? I'm sorry. What the heck is molt reconstruct? Oh. Okay, yes. You heal for energy spent on the initial casting cost of abilities. I totally confounded those two things. I'm sorry. Yeah, cool idea. I think the arcane slots for Mesa feel competitive in that in that you can get Guardian for armor and then velocity gives you so much fire rate, but I don't think that's a bad suggestion. Clovis, you recommended Zada's Whisper. I mentioned earlier in the stream that I think damaging abilities for Mesa are unexciting to me because I'm doing enough damage to kill everything I'm shooting already. But this is a fantastic way to get more damage if you want it. I agree. Generally, I'm pretty high on this ability in general. I said generally, and then in general, classic. A note about this effect is that it's a little bit nice here because it doesn't give you the void damage and status effect output by adding void damage to the weapon as much as by giving the weapon an extra kind of hit of damage that is void damage. This will not lower your heat status output. I don't think that makes it like better or worse necessarily, but it doesn't have anti-synergy with this build. That's the point. This is also often a really good defensive ability because enemies will get void bubbles on them. Allies can't shoot through that bubble and do damage, but I just don't think you need that here. So if you want damage, I agree this is a great option as it usually is. I don't, but if you do want damage, yeah, I think this is definitely a good choice. I wonder, like, do I want a grouping ability? Not really. I guess we could quickly talk about which ability I might replace. Which I think would be Shooting Gallery. I mentioned earlier that while I think this is a good ability, it's good at what it does, I don't think you need it when you have Shatter Shield on the same frame. You could definitely keep everything. This is a frame where I might consider that. But I think I would be fixing to upgrade Shooting Gallery to something. I'm not sure what, but yeah. I, again, like some, I don't know, energy or something, utility, a damage buff. I think Clovis has the right of it that a lot of people would probably pick a damage increasing effect. I don't think that's bad, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just not that high on that idea. Just catching back up on chat to see if there are other recommendations. Tractor beam on a MOA companion for airborne Mesa. Yeah, you could try that and see if it makes you go further. Mind control Mesa, interesting. With Ace, I would never deny you talking about mind control Mesa. Duhigo and Calroga, excuse me. Welcome back. Duhigo, what's going on? Welcome back. Calroga, thank you for the sub. Good to see you tune in. What's going on? We were just talking about finishing up the Mesa build discussion with helmet ability options, and I was saying I think I would want to reproduce, replace some meaningful effect on Shooting Gallery's slot. It's not that I don't think this ability is effective, I just don't think that you really need it in the context of having Shatter Shield, or I should say I don't need it. I don't use it when I have Shatter Shield up. But I don't know. You've all kind of sold me on Ballistic Battery. On the right weapon, this and its augment is a pretty huge effectiveness increase. But yeah, I'm just not sure what I want. And I do think that's one of Mesa's strengths as a closing thought. I think Mesa is a frame that wants for little, a very complete frame if you want to think of it. We talked earlier a little bit about like Zada's Whisper, or you could do Roar, or like any random damage increase. I just don't think that these accomplish much when you already do this much damage, but if you want more damage, like obviously these are good choices. I don't think there's much else to say. I mentioned earlier that Zada's Whisper does do the void damage as a separate thing, so it will not reduce your heat status output on this build, so don't worry about that. I don't think I want more damage as an ability, but it is a thing you could do. Pillage, again, I don't think the survivability gains are relevant here. This ability is phenomenal, but I don't think it does something this build benefits from. I just think when you have this much tankiness, it just doesn't, I don't value more survivability no matter how effective it is. Something that came up earlier is putting on Thermal Sunder. Because we have Archon Vitality, you can double the heat. Pixel, I'm going to ask you for help. Um, you mentioned that you think this is pretty powerful with Archon Vitality, and I don't fully understand why. But yeah, that could be an option. I'm not sure that accomplishes a lot in that we already have really powerful peacemakers, peacekeepers, regulators, words. But it might be better in this case. That's an option. Altar of Blood for healing. That's interesting. It was suggested earlier that, especially if you like Mesa's Waltz, you might be interested in healing over time. You could do what Ace recommended, and well, what I got confused and I thought Ace recommended, which was to use Molt and its augment to gain health regeneration, and Blood Altar could also do that. I don't think that's a bad idea. Yeah, you could run something that heals you over time. Again, especially if you're in Mesa's Waltz land, you might have fun like having health regeneration while you're in your Peacemaker form. That's cool. I'll see you later, Densora. Thanks for watching. Have fun. So yeah, that I think that's a reasonable option if you wanted. I'm not planning to stay in Peacemaker, so I'm not that excited about the healing thing. But I don't think that's a bad idea. Pixel, you said it's more as a general thing in regards to you talking about leveling Archon Vitality in the context of where it might be used and how difficult it would be to get more of. I guess the Thermal Sunder thing should be a topic for another time, but I just don't fully understand why. I've seen people kill everything in the room with this. Lots of things can do that, of course. I just don't like. Of course I understand that. I said why does the Thermal Sunder Archon Vitality thing work, and you all said because you double the heat proc on Thermal Sunder. It's like, no offense, obviously, but why does that matter? Who cares? Does that do a lot of damage? I have no offense at all. I honestly just don't understand. I've seen videos, of course, because people won't stop sharing them, of everybody, killing the whole map with this. I understand that that is a thing that happens, but I'm not sure I have absorbed the impact of doubling the heat output on that. That's all. But I just don't know. That's all. There's plenty of better people to ask. Pillage I suggested for Blazing Pillage, staying in the heat theme. Let's look at Blazing Pillage. Blazing Pillage. I thought this only did something with Hildren's ability. Yeah. Enemies affected by Haven, Hildren's third ability, will be set ablaze for 200 heat damage and restore 50 additional shields to Hildren. This doesn't do anything if you aren't Hildren. I might try Condemn, since it lets you land your ballistic battery headshots for the funny big numbers. That's a thought. You could hold enemies still for that, or line them up. I was keen on using an explosive weapon with that, but again, the fact that I don't like these ideas doesn't make them bad. I'm just explaining why that's a good idea, and I also don't like it because of this reason. Don't feel bad. I'm just being picky with the Mesa thing. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it more. That's okay. I mean, they don't all have to be complete at the end. You all certainly gave. I think most people probably got an idea from that, but I'm not sure what I'm going to use yet. And I think I will fiddle with the build a little more. At the moment, I'm kind of wanting for a little more efficiency, or maybe some duration would be nice, quality of life. I don't really need it, but it wouldn't be the worst. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, if Thermal Sunder is doing its damage by building up heat status effects, then much for the same reason it's good in this build, yeah, it would increase the damage output. Maybe those status effects are bigger individual hits of heat. So even though you're not doing a lot of them, you're doubling a large amount. That's the beginning of me maybe understanding. Again, I don't know. We'll have to talk about that when we talk about Gauss a little bit, or another frame that people are keen on Thermal Sunder on. But I gather that people like that as a kind of general option. I think I've pretty much covered everything I want to talk about for Mesa's stuff, and hopefully a lot of what you all wanted to talk about. Because I'm not planning to stay in Mesa's Waltz, I think I'm going to take Zeneric, because it'll have time to activate. But you may very well want to bring in Energy Helmet ability, or like healing if you stay in Mesa's Waltz. That seems good. I brought this as a ballistic battery thing. Uh, this is here because you can do a little float while doing Peacemaker with Pax Soar, which I like because I'm rapidly deploying Peacemaker. Furex Wraith gives some fire rate to Peacemaker because it counts as a secondary. And yeah, we're stacking a bunch of heat. And I guess using a Kubro for the occasional mecha nonsense. Mecha Overdrive is not bad here anyway. Cool. Cool. All right, yeah, I mean, the only thing left is fashion. And I mean, what else is there to say besides the ringers? Am I right, chat? Just another quick note that I am going to stream again tonight if you want to just hang out and play Warframe. We are getting raided after prime time. Digital Extremes offered, and I said yes. So in about 2 hours, I'm going to start streaming again. We're going to do a little discussion about fashion now and wind down. But then I'm going to be back in, I guess it'll be like an hour and a half at that point, and I'll stream for another few hours then. If you can't tell, my voice is already like, take a break, which I'm going to do. I'm streaming for 4 hours, but I'm taking a 2 hour break in the middle, so. Vampsing, you said just remembered something called Cascadia Flare. Regulators count as a secondary. Does that work? That sounds like an arcane, and you can't equip weapon arcanes on Peacemaker. Let me try to pull that up. Or that might be like not a secondary arcane as well. Or I might just not have it. Let's see if we can look it up. Yep, came right up. Secondary arcane on heat status effect, that secondary gets 2% damage, stacking up to a lot. The regulators will probably build stacks, but it's the weapon this is equipped on that gets damage. A good question, but you can't equip weapon arcanes on exalted weapons. Yeah, we'll trigger it for your secondary. That's a thought. Yeah, you could use it to spool up the arcane and then use it on that weapon. You could, for example, potentially combine that with Ballistic Battery to some interesting effect, although the base damage from Cascadia Flare and Ballistic Battery's base damage increase don't interact. They would just be two large but unsynergistic base damage increases. Not bad, just not good. Not actively good, nor actively bad. Mesa Fashion, that's this section. And I don't have a ton to say. Personally, I've always thought Mesa had a preponderance of very excellent fashion options. I think the default Mesa skin is cool. I've always liked Mesa Prime's like two coattails and badonk. The hat is neat. I honestly didn't know this skin existed, but I think it looks rad. So yeah, I mean, I haven't updated my fashion for Mesa in quite some time. That's cool. That's just cool. That's neat. I really do like the Mesa Prime hat. I really like that. There's a really cool Tenogen helmet for Mesa that has this scope that I like on the Grax skin. That's neat. Always been a fan of that. Mesa's animation set is something I also use a lot. I'm a big nerd and I want the edgy anime, JoJo gunslinger pose. I want to play female whole horse as a Warframe. So Stardust Crusaders fans, there you go. What else is there to say here? Yeah, the skin, I think the prime skin anyway, which is what we're on, is fairly balanced. You can see that colors aren't in too big chunks. You can mostly have this be the boots, and then there's little bits of it elsewhere. They are definitely a lot of that color. So if you make any of these colorful, yeah, it's going to be a lot, sure. But overall, there's room for some layering on the outfit and a couple of blocks where I think it's totally workable to do like a big splash of color, like some that looks nice. Like that red is kind of neat, isn't it? And then a lot of metallic. Yeah, if you were to go gold, it's a lot in my opinion, but it does look kind of cool because you get the detailing on the boots. I just like this skin. I don't have a whole lot to say. I'm probably gonna rework my fashion a bit. I've always found the light from shooting gallery to be really bright and ballistic battery, so I might go for a slightly darker energy. At the moment, mine is not not that. It's not at all that. So maybe I'll just quickly tone that down to be like a sort of faded green with some purple, some witch bolts. That sounds spicy. See how that looks at some point. But yeah, not too much else to say. I really like the prime skin. I've always been a big fan of this. You do color the regulators separately. You could choose to have them match, but I think it's kind of cool to have them be a little accent of their own, like something a little different. We talked earlier a little bit about how if you're going to use Furex Wraith as a way to increase the fire rate of your regulators, which I would recommend, you do lose a little bit of bonus health for equipping a melee weapon, but I don't think it's significant enough to be worth trading 45% basically free fire rate. For your sanity chat, I was told earlier that this was changed from what I remembered, which was blast radius for launcher weapons, because they were trying to tone that down. So now it's fire rate for secondaries. That's good. I'm probably going to use that on a lot of builds, actually. I built a heavy attack build that just has an unrelated Furex Wraith body count mod that affects the regulators. Now you can show this as holstered. Sorry, you can show this as holstered. And then your fashion is going to feature both the regulators on her arms and also the whatever skin you have for your Furax. You can do the ringers, or let's see what it looks like if you do these guys. Whoa, those are some big hands. That's that's some that's some guys. I don't know. Let me show you what it looks like with no skin. Eh, I think I'm going with the ringers. But my big point was that I think these regulators look really cool. These are the ones from the sentient skin, and I think this is kind of a cool concept. But you're probably going to want to color those separately. Like you can see that things that weren't metallic on the base skin are on the regulator with that different skin. I think it blends pretty well, but the colors would need to be swapped around or changed. Adding a little splash of color or just something different to the regulators is definitely what I'm about. Like I'm kind of down to make these just be, uh, some that cool ice. No, that's not what I want. It could be gold, but that's a little boring. I mean, I want like, give me that bronze. Yeah, yeah, give me that bronze gun. Uh, Anyway, which would take a lot of faffing about in terms of fashion, but I am all for the faffing. The bells feel like gunslinger, Wild West, cowgirl got some hooves level big damage. I can get behind that pixel. Elbow buildcraft, if you like. That's neat. And we're not going to keep turning Mesa around or things might get inappropriate. With that, we have reached the end of our Mesa build crafting journey. um, yeah, I think that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this way of tackling this topic. I hope you had fun. I hope you see I was a little different than what we've done in the past, but I thought it was good. I'm going to say something that might make you a little sad, but then hopefully explain and you won't feel so sad. Most streams I do, I leave the stream being self critical on the level where I say that was bad. You all, a lot of you watching, pay me to stream this way. You evidently do like what I'm doing enough that you're willing to pay me a little money to make me able to keep doing it. Um, and I respond by thinking to myself that I did bad most of the time. I'm trying to get myself to stop doing that, but I didn't think that about this one. So let that be what it may. Let it never be said that I'm not I'm not uninteractable. I do I have reasons why I'm upset with what I think. I liked this one, so thanks very much. We are gonna stream again in like an hour and a half, I said. So if you'd like to watch that, hope to have you back. There's going to be a lot of people here. We're going to hang out and play probably a little bit of the Citron loadout with a bunch of mercenaries spawned from specters, that thing that I was doing. We'll play that a little bit because I have that more or less ready. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I hope to have you back. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, we do this time every week. There is in fact one bad thing you're doing every stream, thinking that the stream is bad. Stop that. That's elegantly put. Please don't spray me with water, though. Thanks to the stream, folks. Ace, yeah, I hope it's entertaining. It'll be something a little different. The stream later tonight. And yeah, I'll see you all tomorrow, next week, this Monday, whenever. We are tomorrow going to do the second of the 2 drink streams. We talked about doing a bunch of lemon focused stuff. I prepared a little bit for that. We talked about doing orange peel and coffee. We're doing that. We're doing another talking and drink making stream. Not alcohol drink making, other drink making. Well, I mean, it can be alcohol too, but that's not meant to be the focus. I've thought a little bit about what to do about that too. Anyway, to prepare for the Kickstarter, the Friday drink stream is happening once more. So yeah, I'll see you all any of those times. Have a good one. Good job. This was a good one, I thought.